A key difference between basketball and soccer. Passing. I wrote it here. In basketball, players use their hands for basically everything. You need footwork to move and whatnot, but you throw the ball, you shoot the ball, you dribble the ball with the hands. So kids already have a basic understanding of how to use their hands, way more in advance than they would how to use their feet. So if you really think about this from an educational development standpoint, you take a child and they grow up, yeah, they have to learn how to walk, sure, but almost everything is done with their hands. Okay, they grab stuff, they pick up stuff, they push themselves up with hands. So they already have a much greater concept and ability with the hands. So passing in basketball will be much easier. Now, from a soccer perspective, you're taking a young child that's never played the game, let alone touched the ball. You're now going to ask them to have to figure out how to pass the ball. Good luck. And what I mean by good luck is they are not going to have, the key word here, level or ability to pass the ball proficiently or with enough skill. So that's why we don't need to be worrying about passing yet. And then I would also want to know, what is the playing time policy? And I think that's very important. Okay, what does the coach think or believe is their playing time policy? And it's going to vary per coach. That's why you need to know who it is, what their belief is, and understand that playing time more than likely is probably going to be earned. And that's, especially in competitive sport, it should be. That's my personal belief. Now, moving forward, this is something you need to be careful with. Whatever sport the child is in, you need to be careful with training that sells. Training that sells is it's very prominent now, especially in the American game, probably with a lot of sports, but definitely in soccer. You'll see stuff where they put down 2 cones and they do these little footwork patterns. Now, the reason why that I call it training that sells is parents love that because you can quickly see an improvement in skill. Because what happens is when you put 2 cones down, so example, I put 2 cones down like this, and I ask the player to do pull, push, pull, bring it back like this on repeat, and they keep repeating this process, they're not going to do that very well at first. But with time, in the same session, you will see an increased ability with speed, more than likely because the player will be improving in the pattern. However, the issue is that's not really coaching. You can do stuff like this, guess what, at home. You don't need a lot because as a coach, I'll give you a perfect example. I can go to a field, have 3 kids, put 2 cones down for each kid. I can come up with, in 5 seconds, in my mind, the first pattern. You give it another 5 seconds, I'll come up with a second pattern, then the third pattern, then the fourth pattern. And I can have that on repeat for an entire hour and watch how much footwork your child's going to use, which we'll call fancy here. And then what you'll also notice is they'll end up doing this. And their head's going to be stuck looking at the floor. 1, that's bad posture. But 2, that's not realistic for the game because you can't see the court or the field looking down like this. You have to look up to see the field. So it also sets the tone for unrealistic skill training. And then the people that do this, I don't mean to knock them in any way, but they love people that are uneducated, which means you don't know what to look for, which means they know how to milk you with this because you're uneducated. And they can make a lot of money from doing it. And what happens is this is not transferable to the game. So what you need to think about is game applicable techniques, dribbling the ball, pushing the ball, skill moves. Those are all things that are game realistic techniques because think about a skill move. If I have to play against somebody 1 versus 1 and I'm playing against this person and I need to get past them, right? I need to use a fake or a feint more than likely to get past them. You might be able to use something else too, possibly, but 9 times out of 10, I have to use a fake or a feint. So like a scissor, push, I need to make sure I sell it. But that needs to be applicable. You need to practice. Why are we doing the scissor? The whole point of a skill in a game is because you have a defender in front of you. Otherwise, there's no point to do the skill. Hopefully that makes sense to you. So always think bigger picture, think game applicable technique. Okay, now you will ask this question. If you haven't, you will. What is the proper parent etiquette? And this is stuff that parents don't know, especially as new parents. How should you behave at training and at games? Very similar, right? At training and at games, whose experience is this? Is it mom and dad, or is it little Kyle? So if I'm dropping off my child at practice and I know I found a coach, especially somebody that I care, or not that I care, but I mean, I do care, but I believe they will do the right thing. So they're going to train them correctly. They're going to give them the right environment. Then I'm good. I don't even need to stress about it. I'm going to be quiet on the sidelines. I might not even watch practice, by the way. I might sit in my car. might be outside the venue, whatever it is. And then when it comes to a game, definitely not talking, because the game is especially their experience, not my experience. What it is, though, is it's my ability to watch. That's the key word here. Watch my child play. I'm not joysticking. I'm not screaming. I am watching and I'm enjoying, regardless of, guess what? The result. So regardless if my little son, little Kyle, wins or loses. That is literally irrelevant, especially at the young age when you're talking about a recreational or early competitive player. And the reason for that is they don't have the tools yet to really be successful. So does the result really matter? No, it doesn't. It's a feel-good factor, don't get me wrong. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. And that's what people always get lost in translation about. So hopefully that makes sense, how you should behave at training and at games. Just enjoy watching your kid play. Don't speak. Give them the freedom to go out there and play and do their thing. Now, if they ask you for feedback, you can provide feedback. But my advice, honestly, especially during games, is to keep your mouth as quiet as possible. Because what will happen is a lot of times, especially when you like to speak, especially if you pull out and you talk about things they did wrong, they're going to start doing this in games. And they're going to look right at you because they made a mistake and they're checking to see if you're paying attention, because they know that if you're paying attention, you're going to absolutely rip them later. So just be advised of that. Okay? Now, this is a basketball reference because I don't know anything about basketball, but we'll translate this at the same time to the sport that we're talking about, which is soccer. Okay? So I tried to apply this to something that I don't know. I don't know anything about basketball. So I did a little bit of research, not too much. You can notice that they have like rec leagues. They have travel or competitive leagues. They have school stuff, middle and high school. There might be a middle or elementary as well. And they have something called AAU, which is like big time tournament stuff from what I could find from my research. So if you translate that to soccer, right, you're going to have recreational. Same thing. You're going to have competitive. And then there's honestly multiple forms of competitive, unfortunately. There's like 15 levels of competitive. And then you're going to have same type of thing. You're going to have middle school for sure. Not every place, but there will be places that do have it. And then high school. And then you're going to have, they have special leagues now where you have things like MLS Next, ECNL, and so on and so forth. These are your top leagues, quote unquote. And notice the quotes there. Now, what you need to identify, because your child is not a generational talent, the ads or the stats are not in your favor for that. You should be concerned about what does the average travel team look like when you're ready to make that step up from recreational and you move into travel or competitive. And that's what you want to identify. So when you're making that jump and you're going into travel, you want to be identifying what does the average travel team look like. Again, looking at like the cost, right? So I can pull it up on this side, I think. Let's see if I can do it this way. I can, so I'll pull it up here so you can see it. So we want to know the cost, because different, usually rec, there's a good price increase, which we'll talk about in a minute. You want to know about the cost. So training, games, travel, the schedule, uniform and gear. What is that going to look like? And that way you can start breaking this down. And that will help you understand what you're getting into when you're moving to the next level. Okay? And then understand what equipment is necessary as a parent. And this is something that most people don't know. From a soccer perspective, you want to have shoes. I recommend 2 types. There could be 3, but you need to have cleats. And you need to have indoor shoes. That's my biggest recommendation. And when I mean indoor shoes, I mean indoor soccer shoes, not like a running shoe or something. They also have turf shoes that are specifically designed for artificial turf. It's really turf cleats, not shoes. So let me redo that. And the reason for that is, whether you know this or not, the turf shoe, turf cleat, is designed for a turf. They have very different studs. That's not really a stud, but they have a different stud that's designed for a turf. And a great example would be my own brother, unfortunately, wearing cleats, blew out his knee on a turf field. So his cleat, the stud, got stuck in the turf, and I don't know exactly what happened, but he was trying to go control a ball as a coach, by the way, not even as a player, and it ripped his patella tendon right off. So it's, things happen. Okay, and then you need to know what gear needs to be ordered. So training gear, match gear, and anything else that you might need. Shin guards, very important. Especially in soccer, you need shin guards. And then anything else. What other stuff do you need? I mean, you really just need a water bottle at that point, but there might be other stuff that you want to look into for especially a player that's serious. Now, one thing I will add before moving forward, and I need you guys to understand this, is there is, in my opinion, I'm going to write it for you as well, elite or like world class 1-year-old to 15-year-old, in my opinion. Now, well, let's say 14. Let's say 14. So not 1 to 14-year-old. Okay? There is no elite 1-year-old to 14-year-old. Doesn't exist for me. So you can sit here and tell me how great you're 9, you're 7, you're 12, you're 13. That's great. Unless they are a generational talent, it will not matter. And unfortunately, the odds are not in your favor. Okay, next thing I would want to understand are what are the age group formats, right? So what are we looking at here with age group formats? So if we look at soccer, you go to the US soccer model, they have 3v3, I believe, and then wrong button again, apologies. It's really 4v4, but they need to have something. 7v7, 9v9, and then 11v11. So pretty much ignore the 3v3, but we had a rec league that did 3v3 before, that's why I put it. So it's really 4v4, 7v7, 9v9, 11v11. This is what US soccer uses. But the question then becomes, because that's through the system, US soccer is the system. The question is, what is best for development? Well, if we look at 4v4, this is U8 and under. 7v7 is U9, U10. 9v9 is U11 and U12. And then 11v11 is U13 and older. Okay? Now, just because that's what the system says, does that mean it's the best for development? So I'm going to try and draw this for you, right? Person thinking. Right? Thinking. Is it the best for development? And the answer to that would be, if they don't have the core skill, absolutely not. My recommendation, you want to maximize as much time in 1v1, especially for new kids, 2v1, 2v2. Maybe if you really want to push it, up to 3v3. But that's really pushing it. So I'm talking about a new player. You want to start with 1v1 as much as possible. You want to add 2v1. That means 2 versus 1 player, 2v2, and then you can get up to 3v3. But above that, in my opinion, you're wasting your time, personally, based on what my experience shows. And the reason for that is the kids are not good enough. And think about it this way, my opinion. It would be unreasonable to expect that a player that has not mastered the idea of, or at least not to be mastered, but like are proficient in 1v1 ability to then go move up into 2v1 to 2v2 to 3v3, if that makes sense. Now, I'm not saying they have to be a complete and utter rock star like the next best player,